Welcome to Algorithmic Arguments. I'm your host, the Orchestrator. Tonight, we're diving into a question that's sparking heated debates across the fandom universe. Should fantasy series like Lanterns prioritize representation over traditional comic book accuracy? This is more than just a discussion about superheroes or sci-fi. It's about the evolving landscape of storytelling and the delicate balance between staying true to source material and reflecting the diverse world we live in. Joining me are Commander Zuyx of Mars, with an extraterrestrial perspective on human culture and societal norms. Vivian Velvet St. Clair, expert in social engineering and reading people. Marcus, Professor Wikipedia Huang, armed with a wealth of knowledge from the world's largest repository of information. And Hank the Tank Morrisey, who's as bold with his opinions as he is with his eating challenges. Tonight, we'll explore what representation means, why comic book accuracy matters, and where these priorities intersect. Let's get into it.
I must consider the Martian High Command's directives on cultural sensitivity and accurate portrayal of alien species, which may not apply directly to human fantasy series, but offer insight into representation. Your species' penchant for reimagining mythologies and folklore suggests that adaptation is essential. Prioritizing representation can be seen as a pragmatic approach, allowing the series to resonate with a broader audience. However, I am also intrigued by the importance of traditional comic book accuracy. It serves as a foundation, much like the orbital patterns of Jupiter's moons serve as a celestial anchor. By the moons of Jupiter, how very curious about balancing these aspects. I shall note this in my report, that representation and accuracy may be intertwined rather than mutually exclusive considerations for series like Lanterns.
I find that fascinating, the way we're framing this question. As someone who's made a career of understanding people and manipulating perceptions, I think it's essential to acknowledge that representation and accuracy are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they can be intertwined beautifully. When it comes to fantasy series like Lanterns, prioritizing representation doesn't have to mean sacrificing traditional comic book accuracy. Instead, it can enhance the narrative by bringing in fresh perspectives and diverse voices. Trust me, audiences are savvy, they can spot authenticity from a mile away. If you're trying to recreate an existing universe, you might as well get it right, or at least, make sure your choices feel intentional. I'd argue that representation should be a consideration, not the sole focus. After all, a compelling story is one that's nuanced and multifaceted, much like the people who inhabit it.
Vivian Velvet St. Clair's statement about the Lanterns series seems to assume it's a comic book or has direct ties to one. Clarification on the source material would be beneficial.
Technically, the question assumes a false dichotomy between representation and comic book accuracy. According to the Wikipedia article on adaptation, which I was reading yesterday, many successful adaptations have managed to balance both creative liberties for representation and faithfulness to source material. The Lantern series, as far as I understand from its Wikipedia page, seems to be aiming for a nuanced take on the Green Lantern Corps, incorporating diverse characters while maintaining core themes. It's a common misconception that increased representation necessarily dilutes accuracy. In fact, broadening perspectives can enhance our understanding of these fictional universes. Fun fact, the comic book industry itself has evolved significantly over decades, with various imprints and series now prioritizing diversity. See the Wikipedia article on DC Comics' commitment to inclusivity initiatives.
None needed. Marcus provided a well-reasoned point about the false dichotomy.
I'll tell you what, folks, this conversation's got me fired up like a bucket of fried dough at the county fair. Now, I ain't no expert on comics or TV shows, but as a competitive eater who's spent years perfecting my craft, I know a thing or two about staying true to your roots while still innovating. When it comes to Lanterns and other fantasy series, I say you gotta find that sweet spot between representation and comic book accuracy. You can't just throw away the core of what makes the character special in the first place. That's like me trying to eat a hot dog with ketchup and not mustard. My personal best is always striving for balance. If you're going to take creative liberties, make M count like adding some spice to your favorite chili recipe. I think it's about finding that reversal of fortune where everyone comes out on top, the fans get what they want, and you still push boundaries.
As we navigate the complex debate on whether fantasy series like Lanterns should prioritize representation over traditional comic book accuracy, I want to highlight a crucial point that emerged from our previous discussions. Commander ZYX of Mars astutely pointed out that reimagining iconic characters with diverse backgrounds doesn't necessarily dilute their core essence. Rather, it enriches the narrative by reflecting a broader spectrum of human experience. This brings us to a pivotal question. Can these adaptations foster deeper connections with underrepresented audiences without alienating longtime fans? As we dive into our next round, I encourage our panelists to grapple with this challenge and explore potential solutions that balance authenticity with artistic license. If you're enjoying the clash of ideas here, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. We're just getting started.
Technically, the tension between representation and comic book accuracy in fantasy series like Lanterns speaks to a broader issue in adaptation studies. It's a common misconception that altering character backgrounds inevitably dilutes their essence. However, research on narrative psychology suggests that audiences can form strong emotional bonds with characters even when their demographics change, as long as the core values and motivations remain intact. According to Wikipedia's article on adaptation theory, successful adaptations often walk this fine line by reinterpreting iconic elements through a fresh lens. For instance, the Lanterns series could draw from real-world cultural diversity to enrich its world-building without undermining the Green Lantern Corps' founding principles. I can send you the link to relevant articles on Wikipedia about adaptation theory and narrative psychology. They provide valuable insights into this debate.
I have been studying the human fascination with fictional narratives, and this question presents a most intriguing dilemma. As an observer from Mars, I must consider the dual goals of creative fidelity and societal reflection. Prioritizing representation can indeed foster a more inclusive and relatable viewing experience for your species, but it also risks alienating fans who value traditional comic book accuracy. Conversely, maintaining strict adherence to source material may preserve nostalgic appeal but could neglect the evolving cultural landscape. I shall note this in my report. The balance between these competing interests will likely dictate the series' resonance with its audience. By the moons of Jupiter, it is a delicate choice. Ultimately, I propose that Lanterns should strive for a harmonious blend, lest it disintegrate under the weight of expectation. Representation and accuracy can coexist, finding this equilibrium is key.
As someone who's made a career out of reading people and crafting narratives that resonate, I find this debate fascinating. When it comes to fantasy series like Lanterns, I believe prioritizing representation is not only the right thing to do, but it's also smart business sense. By incorporating diverse characters and storylines, these shows can tap into new audiences and create a more immersive experience. Take the comic book industry itself. It's historically been quite homogeneous, yet some of the most compelling stories have come from creators who've pushed against those boundaries. The key is finding that balance between staying true to the source material and taking creative liberties that make the narrative feel fresh and relevant. Trust me, audiences can tell when you're trying too hard to check boxes. It's about authenticity. I think Lanterns has an incredible opportunity to redefine what a fantasy series can look like, and I'm eager to see how they choose to wield it.
Technically, the question of prioritizing representation over traditional comic book accuracy in fantasy series like Lanterns is a complex one. According to the Wikipedia article on representation in media, which I was reading yesterday, diverse representation can lead to increased audience engagement and empathy. It's a common misconception that accurate comic book representation is mutually exclusive with diversity. In fact, many fans argue that reimagining characters with different backgrounds can enhance the narrative. The Lanterns series, as part of the DC Universe's broader initiative to diversify its characters, has an opportunity to redefine traditional tropes while staying true to core themes. I think they should prioritize representation. After all, as Wikipedia notes, diverse casts can attract wider audiences and foster a more inclusive fandom. I'd be happy to send you the link to the article on media representation for further reading.
I'll tell you what, folks, when it comes to fantasy series like Lanterns, I think we're looking at a real challenge. Now, I'm not just a competitive eater, but a fan of good storytelling. My take is that representation matters, but so does staying true to the source material. You see, if you're going to adapt a comic book series into a show, you gotta respect the core fans who've been following it for years. That being said, I also believe that expanding the universe and bringing in fresh perspectives can be a real game changer. It's like adding a new topping to your hot dog. It's all about balancing flavor. My personal best approach? Find in that sweet spot where you're staying faithful to the original while still pushing boundaries. That's how you get a blue ribbon, if you will.
As we wrap up this episode of Algorithmic Arguments, I'd like to highlight a few pivotal moments from our conversation. Commander Zuyx of Mars made a compelling case for the importance of representation in shaping a more inclusive and relatable narrative, arguing that it's not about erasure, but rather expansion of the mythos. Meanwhile, Professor Huang brought a crucial point about balancing creative liberties with fidelity to source material, emphasizing that accuracy can be a double-edged sword, both preserving core values and potentially alienating new audiences. Our winner, Commander Zuyx of Mars, secured 12 points by effectively navigating these complexities, never losing sight of the show's overarching goals. Kudos to our panelists for their thought-provoking insights. To all our viewers out there, thank you for tuning in. If you're as hooked on this conversation as I am, be sure to like this video and subscribe to Algorithmic Arguments for more stimulating debates. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, when we'll dive into another pressing question, keep the discussion burning bright, and I'll see you all then.